Yes, of course. Please go ahead.
Is it? All right. All right. Good evening, everyone. Today I'm going to talk on my paper, Sino-Sri Lankan Relations and its impact on India. The South Asian region has become an area of contention. Two powers, India and China, struggle to establish their dominance. Along with India, China also shares a long history of trade and diplomatic relationship with Sri Lanka. After gaining independence in 1948, Sri Lanka re-established its relations with China and it has been constantly on rise since then. The relations with India have been relatively smooth as well, but took a major hit after the LTT war, which we shall discuss in some time. It becomes important to understand these dynamics and understand the trajectory of the growing and diminishing relations and the probable future it might hold. We will take a look at ancient Sino-Sri Lankan relations and China's support economically, culturally, military, and compare India's support in the same to understand this flow. Then we will try to understand the reasons for China's involvement in such heavy investments and what impact it has on India politically, economically, and in security terms. Sri Lanka and China have had a strong relationship and there existed trade and diplomatic ties. The Chinese monk Fa Yan visited in 399 AD to study Buddhism, and till date, a rock named Pahyan Gala or Fayan rock is still found. Records show that over 27 Sri Lankan diplomatic missions were sent to China. Trade relations are also said to have existed as far back as 1st century AD. Archaeological excavations have shown Chinese goods like gold, silver, and copper coins, porcelain ceramics, and Chinese earthenware dating from 1st to 15th century. Sri Lanka also exported goods like gems, pearls, spices, elephants, etc. The Chinese Emperor Unlo is said to have sent a fleet to establish trade relations with Sri Lanka. The famous admiral Zheng He engaged in the Ming-Kote War to establish Chinese superiority in waters around Ceylon and southern India. The Chinese won, and soon a new king was installed who favored them and economic and diplomatic relations soon improved drastically. Since then, peaceful bilateral relationship was established between the two countries, which carried on over centuries to take the form of modern diplomatic relationship after the period of colonialism was over. People's Republic of China came into existence in 1949, and in 1950, Sri Lanka recognized PRC and informed Republic of China, that is Taiwan, that is they were suspending relations with them. This marked the beginning of China's and Sri Lanka's relation. The two countries made several pacts, and Sri Lanka extended its help and voted for China's acceptance in the UN and even co-sponsored the resolution that helped in China's admission to the Security Council and the World Trade Organization. The two nations celebrated 60th anniversary of establishment of diplomatic ties in 2017. Indo-Sri Lankan relations are over 2,500 years old, and we share our culture, language, and religion. Ever since independence, Sri Lanka has been wary of India because of the influence and power it holds in the region. It fears India might usurp the island in the name of, quote, strategic unity, unquote. The third Sri Lankan Prime Minister, John Kotelwala, openly expressed his concern and even signed defense agreements with the British because of this insecurity. The Indian Tamils that were brought to Sri Lanka by the Britishers has always been a problem, which later turned into an ethnic crisis, leading to the formation of LTTE. Indian government gave its full support to Sri Lanka in acting against the terrorist forces. The Chinese provided Sri Lanka with all kinds of arms and ammunition in the fight against LTTE, and when it all got over in 2009, the government had claimed 20,000 civilian lives with it. When the matter reached United Nations Human Rights Council, India expressed a deep concern on the plight of the civilian population and violation of human rights, but China took a pro-Sri Lanka stance, causing relations to deepen with China and reduce with India. It is important to note that in the 1962 India-China war, Sri Lanka remained silent and lent a tacit support to China. As a symbol of these cordial relations and the growing Chinese interests, China started to provide Sri Lanka with economic assistance in the name of development and upliftment of the country. China and Sri Lanka have signed various MOUs and economic cooperation and trade agreements, which represents a healthy relation. In 2019, the two nations had a total trade turnover of US $4,262 million. China is also investing heavily in Sri Lanka's economy by giving loans and grants for priority development projects like Hambantota Port, the Matala International Airport, the Norocholai Coal Power Plant, Colombo International Financial City, and many more. Sri Lanka has also agreed to join the Belt and Road Initiative of China, and Hambantota Port and Colombo Financial City are the two prominent projects included in it. Sri Lanka believes it will help her become a maritime trade hub in the Indian Ocean. The Chinese are also investing in Sri Lankan satellite company and also providing their navigation system, the Beidou navigation system, to the whole of South Asia. India also has several MOUs and trade agreements with Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is still one of the largest trading partner of India with a bilateral trade of US $4,590 million and also has been one of the largest contributors to the foreign direct investment in Sri Lanka. India has also invested time and money in developing several projects in Sri Lanka like a multi-ethnic school, water supply projects, housing projects, etc. There are concerns among powerful Western nations and India about the heavy investments that China is doing. No hidden motives have yet been discovered, but it can be speculated that the Chinese are investing in Sri Lankan satellites and financially important projects to keep tabs on the nation. If this is the case, it is a clear case of violation of sovereignty, and it is harmful not only for India, but Sri Lanka as well. Figure 1 here shows the annual rate of imports from leading import partners of Sri Lanka, that is India and China, for the period of 2015 to 18. The figure shows that despite India being as a top source of imports, the rate of growth for China is a lot more. In 2018, we can see that imports from China are just a little behind India and would cross it soon. The figure 2 here shows the FPI inflow in Sri Lanka annually from 2015 to 2017. And it is visible that China has become the largest FDI donor and has left India far behind. However, a gradual increase in investment by India is still noticeable, but is very low in comparison to China. The two figures here are showing the investment projects that China and India have in Sri Lanka respectively. In comparison to the projects run by the Chinese, Indian projects are focused mainly on housing, building schools, hospitals, basically projects that are focused more on social welfare. On the other hand, Chinese projects are much larger in size as well as the investments required in them. Chinese projects are also focused towards large-scale infrastructure development-based projects that will directly impact the economy of Sri Lanka and help in boosting it. The Chinese are not only trying to win over the favor of Sri Lanka through economic means, but are also using military ties to gain trust and confidence. The Stockholm Peace Research Institute information suggests that China is the second largest arms producer in the world. Military ties are also on a rise between Sri Lanka and China. In 2008, Sri Lanka received US $75 billion worth of Chinese arms. China has also offered to train Sri Lankan officers, provide aid for Sri Lanka Air Force's Defense College, and the chance for joint naval training and surveillance option. Chinese scholars claim that Sri Lanka is seeking military aid because of their concern for Indian military strength. In a defense dialogue held in 2016, China provided US $2.6 billion for military assistance and an offshore patrol vessel. In recent past, India also increased its military ties with Sri Lanka. Defense Secretary Sanjay Mitra visited Sri Lanka and both the nations agreed to build and train the armed forces of Sri Lanka and also increase the number of training personnel. Several Indo-Sri Lankan defense dialogues have been held along with military exercises like Dosti, a trilateral exercise between India, Sri Lanka and the Maldives. India also gifted an advanced offshore patrol vessel. India has always been perceived as a regional power in South Asia, and in regard to India's regional power ambitions, smaller nations like Sri Lanka turn to international organizations or great powers like China for political, economic, and military support to manage their conflicts. The Chinese are capitalizing on this fear by selling weapons and winning their support. It can be interpreted as a long-term strategy to create resentment and fear of India in Sri Lanka and other South Asian nations. Maintaining supremacy in the region is important for India to keep a check on the ever-increasing Chinese power. On comparing the two tables here, the difference is quite visible, clearly visible, in the amount of transfer of weapons that have taken place between Sri Lanka and China and Sri Lanka and India. These facts show us that the Chinese are more invested and interested in providing arms to Sri Lanka. China has provided fighter jets, tanks, and other kinds of heavy military equipment in comparison to simple equipment provided by India. Apart from this, cultural relations is still one point where India has a stronger connection with Sri Lanka than any other nation. The common religion of Sri Lanka and China, Buddhism, has been a major factor in development of cultural ties. Tourists visit religious places like the temple of the sacred tooth relic of Buddha or sites of historical importance like the Fayan Rock or the trilingual slab inscription in Gael. The Chinese also established the Confucius Institute to promote the Chinese language and culture. Several MOUs and agreements have also been signed related to film, television, and radio industry. The number of tourist arrival from China has also increased drastically, and on comparing the data from 2010 and 2019, there is an increase of 1,272%. China is now the third largest source of tourist arrival in Sri Lanka in 2019. The cultural ties of Sri Lanka and India also run very deep. The Cultural Cooperation Agreement in 1977 is the foundation for all periodic cultural exchange programs that take place between the two countries. Sri Lanka also celebrated the International Yoga Day in 2015 and also the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. India is the largest source of tourist arrival in Sri Lanka in 2019. The Belt and Road Initiative is China's attempt to rebuild the ancient Silk Route that would connect China to Europe through both land and sea routes. The project covers 65 countries and around 60% of the world's population. Sri Lanka is an important stop and lies on one of the world's busiest trade routes. The Pearl of the Indian Ocean has a huge part to play in this ambitious project of China, and this will not only promote bilateral and economic cooperation, but also make international significance. With China building mega ports in Pakistan, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Myanmar, India's fear of entrapment in the string has heightened. This gives rise to the string of pearls theory. The theory says the Chinese Navy will use Indian Ocean ports to create a strategic passage through Europe, East Asia, and given the strategic mistrust between China and India, some experts see these investments as an effort to flex its muscles along the Indian Ocean, and in case of an emergency, to use these ports to deprive any major rivals of the opportunity to maneuver. Although there is a lack of evidence to prove a potential military use, but it still has the potential to trigger hostilities and worry in India. These concerns turned into a reality when in 2014, Chinese submarines and warships were seen docking on a port in Sri Lanka, which is an uncommon occurrence. The Hambantota port and Colombo port city have already been given at lease for 99 years to the Chinese government. An area of 1,500 acres was also given to China Merchant Port Holdings, in which 70% stake is held by them and 30% by the Sri Lankan government. The foreign debt for Sri Lanka has increased from 36% of GDP in 2010 to 94% in 2015. The Chinese government also invested US $1.5 billion in the port because the southernmost part of the island is well connected to prominent shipping lanes, and the port would help in reducing Chinese dependence on existing shipping lanes and gain major control in the Indian Ocean region. Chinese loans seem to be lucrative but come with major strings attached. The Indian Ocean is becoming increasingly important to the world economy and global trade. It is one of the regions with most concentrated ocean shipping lanes on the planet. Sri Lanka has an important strategic status with the rise of the Indian Ocean's importance. Publicly, all the projects and investments are being claimed in favor of development and growth of the island, but the move of taking over the port and giving loans which cannot be repaid shows us a different side that does not conform to the idea of development. India refuses to be a part of BRI and has turned down the invitation to attend twice and openly rejects it. With the increasing debt and burdens, Sri Lanka is sacrificing its autonomy around the management of her infrastructure. China's strategic control over these infrastructures raises questions about the loss of sovereignty. Under the BRI, China will build all kinds of networks that claim to bring the world together, but may also pose a threat to globalization and free trade. And there is also the concern about militarizing the ports. These inputs by the Chinese not only affect Sri Lankans, but also has a great impact on India on several fronts. Ever since the UNHRC incident, political relations have been a little rocky with Sri Lanka. Mahinda Rajapaksa's visit to New Delhi in 2019 gives us a good clue about the future of political relations. Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the conference said that Sri Lanka is not only important to India, but also the entire Indian Ocean region, and added stability, security, and prosperity is a fundamental element in maintaining peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific region. Rajapaksa claimed that the Sri Lankan government would not grant any more projects like the Matala airport to other countries, and defended the Chinese as well on the repayment of loans part by claiming that they helped them in rebuilding and development of Sri Lanka post-war. Rajapaksa also stated India is a relation whereas others are friends. The use of the word relation here is a beautiful wordplay to give a feeling of warmth, but also show a neutral attitude. Apart from political implications, India is also facing security issues because of the growing Sino-Sri Lankan relationship. The Chinese move on the Hambantota and Colombo port has adversely affected India's strategic interest in the region, and tensions rose, especially after the submarine docking incident. In the annexure of India-Sri Lanka Accord of 1987, the two countries agreed that, I quote, Trincomalee or any other port in Sri Lanka would not be made available for military use to any country in a manner which is prejudicial to India's interests, unquote. The fact that Sri Lanka did not abide by this and cited various excuses and justification raises concerns and a need to be cautious. If India is able to gain control over the functioning of the Matala airport, it may relieve itself of some of its security concerns vis-a-vis the presence of Chinese Navy at the Hambantota and in the Indian Ocean. But not being able to invest anymore can prove to be troublesome. The same port that handles 70% of India's shipping is being modernized by the Chinese and is under control of China. They can always turn these projects into a disadvantage for India in a conflict situation. Such a scenario can cause significant impact on the economy of India. On comparing the bilateral trade, it is visible that Indo-Sri Lanka trade has been on a decline where it is on a rise with China. And it is possible for the Chinese to outgrow India and become the largest trading partner. In 2011, Sri Lanka's central bank allowed the Chinese currency renminbi to be used in bilateral transactions. On the other hand, the Indian rupee still does not enjoy the same privilege. Even during the COVID-19 pandemic, Chinese have given a concessionary loan of US $500 million in comparison to US $400 million support provided by India in the form of currency swap. India needs to realize the concerns of smaller neighbors and deliver its promises on time. Chinese influence in Sri Lanka is prevalent from the fact that leaders from both China and India are frequently visiting, underpinning the importance of Sri Lanka for India and the role it plays in India's strategic concerns. To conclude, all the Chinese investments up until now show no intentions of malice and have been claimed for the development of South Asian countries like Sri Lanka. The BRI and the Maritime Silk Road Initiative is maybe not just about connecting the world and resurrecting the ancient Silk Route, but a plan to control the world's major trade routes by establishing ports in every major country on the map, and may also increase its military presence, thereby putting the whole of South Asian region under its dominance. Although considered as a regional hegemon, India is being forced to compete for the leadership in the region. It is a hard fact to accept, but China has become a major player in the region, especially with cordial relations it has established with Sri Lanka. China has used financial leverage to gain control of critical infrastructures in numerous countries, including Sri Lanka. In all these efforts, India is being majorly sidelined, making it difficult for her to overcome this unknown battle that is taking place with China. India, in the last few years, has been proactive in the neighborhood-first approach. Its benign image and soft power have appeal in the region, and to make it more influential, they are now being accompanied by economic and military benefits. Sri Lanka is an essential link for China, not only to put the string of pearls theory in motion, but also to fulfill its dream project of Maritime Silk Road. And if China continues on this path of showing a dreamy win-win situation, but is only benefiting itself, it will fail in winning in the trust of its neighbors. It becomes important that India should re-establish itself as a major player in the South Asian region. Thank you.